Welcome to the HSC 2017 Legal Studies Themes and Challenges video. With the HSC looming near, I really like talking about the themes and challenges because for very little effort and just a shift in your mindset, you can cause a really big impact to your results. A lot of reasons for this. Number one, when we're talking about themes and challenges, we're talking about excellent vocabulary that you can be including in your responses. So you're showing your markers you understand and that you are comfortable with legal terminology. So that's really great. Second of all, the essay question won't necessarily come from the syllabus, when in fact it might come from that little bit above the syllabus there, which has the themes and challenges. If you're looking for where to find the themes and challenges, you can have a look here. So I've just taken a screenshot of what the syllabus looks like, and we can see towards the bottom there, we begin the nature of crime and so forth, everything that's in your textbooks and your study notes, and then at the top there, we've got the themes and challenges, and that is a really important thing for you to look at. So when you're creating your study notes, you want to be going through and talking about the way they respond to the themes and challenges. When you're writing your essays, your practice essays, when you're jotting down notes, you always want to be looking through it through the lens of the themes and challenges. So that is where they are, that is where you can find them. This is not just for crime. Also in your options, you will have themes and challenges there as well. So take this into your options as well. I'm going to use crime as an example for this, but definitely take it into your options. Have a look at your options again. When you go through your study notes, consider, would I be comfortable if the essay question was actually about one of these themes and challenges? Because it does really change the way that you shape your entire essay. No longer are you going content-based, but instead you've been given a really broad overview. So something like the role of discretion, for example, if they're not specifying an exact station in the criminal justice system, you have the entire syllabus to draw upon there. So it's a very different style of approaching your essay because you're given the theme and challenge and then you pick and choose whichever part of the syllabus you think is most appropriate to discuss. Whereas if we were given, for example, the nature of sentencing and punishment and how effective that is, obviously you're picking pieces of information from that part of the syllabus. So it is a very different approach. Please don't overlook it. Please become very comfortable with the words of the themes and challenges, as we will in this video, because no matter what, you can integrate these into your responses and prove to a marker that you're very comfortable with legal terminology. To start off with, let's talk about the theme of the role of discretion in the criminal justice system. If you're not sure what discretion is, this is the time to know. I know that this was my half-yearly question in 2015 about the role of discretion, particularly in relation to sentencing and punishment. This absolutely left us shook. You can imagine at half-yearlies for our cohort, we were just making our way through crime still. I know some schools have only done human rights by this point and so on. So we were really quite lost in the moment, didn't recognise that a question could entirely come from a theme and challenge. So it was pretty brutal. Fortunately for me, I knew what discretion meant. Unfortunately, there were other people who were a little confused because we hadn't looked at it too closely and what discretion exactly means. Put simply, it is the freedom of judgment to decide on what to do in a particular circumstance. So you know when it's like 6 o'clock and you're feeling really hungry, you know there's ice cream in the fridge, but then dinner's coming at 7 and you have to use your discretion in that moment to realise if I eat the bowl of ice cream, I'm going to be spoiling my dinner at 7 o'clock. So using my discretion, I'm looking at what's in front of me and I've decided, no, this is the decision I'm going to make in this particular circumstance. So put simply, it's about having a choice. It's about exercising that choice. Obviously, a little bit more complicated than just ice cream before dinner when we're looking at the criminal justice system. So I've just put some dot points here about different ways where it is displayed in the criminal justice system. Police powers, number one. So just a really brief example here. If a police officer is looking at a situation, they're monitoring what might be a suspicious circumstance, suspicious behaviour, whatever it may be, a police officer is monitoring the situation, they use their discretion as to whether or not this person is going to be a danger to society, if they're going to use force, if they're going to use a taser, if they're going to shoot, and so forth. It's about making the decision in that moment, in that particular circumstance in order to make the best decision possible according to obviously the guidelines and the circumstances and whatnot. So that's a very simple example of police powers there, but also in arrest, is it best that we arrest this person, yes or no? In the investigation, who are we going to be interviewing? Who are we going to be cross-examining and so forth. In charge and charge negotiation, there is a little bit of discretion in here as well, having the opportunity to decide, are you going to plead guilty to manslaughter or not guilty to murder and so forth. So again, you have discretion there. The Director of Public Prosecutions also has discretion in what matters they're going to be taking forth, particularly on appeal. But to me, the most simple and one of the most rich ways that discretion is shown in the criminal justice system is in sentencing. So we can talk a lot about discretion when it comes to sentencing. For example, if we're going to be talking about mandatory sentencing, we're talking about the way that removes a lot of the discretionary powers of the judiciary system in this situation here. So mandatory sentencing means that the aggravating factors, the mitigating factors, and everything surrounding what would otherwise be the judge's decision has been taken away in terms of sentencing. In other times of sentencing outside of mandatory, we are looking at things like mitigating factors, aggravating factors, the victim impact statements, the judicial guidelines for sentencing. Everything in that comes together to form the circumstance of which a judge would make a decision, would use their discretion as to what is the most appropriate sentence for this offender. In talking about issues of compliance and non-compliance, this is my absolute favourite theme or challenge because I swear by the fact that you can engage with compliance and non-compliance in every single crime essay you will write. The reason being, crime essays are about the criminal justice system. We would not have a criminal justice system if it weren't for compliance and non-compliance. Our CJS aims to encourage compliance and aims to adequately deal with non-compliance. That is the entire reason we have this system. So it becomes very, very easy to talk about compliance and non-compliance in crime essays as soon as you really acutely switch your brain to considering it. It sounds great, compliance, non-compliance, they sound like great words. It's better than behaving, non-behaving and so forth. And you like to change it up throughout. So this is a great way to look at that. So for example, I've got this graph down the bottom here. Dealing with non-compliance, there are ways that the criminal justice system deals with this, like law enforcement. We wouldn't have police if everyone were complying in a beautiful state of anarchy. Not the case. And so we do have law enforcement there to deal with non-compliance. The purposes of punishment also aim to deal with non-compliance, and obviously the penalties that come with various different crimes as well. In order to encourage compliance, we have crime prevention, situational and social. If you're not sure about them, we'll be going through situational and social crime prevention in another one of these legal videos. General deterrence, encouraging compliance, deterring people from non-compliance, and again, penalties. Penalties both work ways in that they want to deal with non-compliance, but at the same time encourage compliance, if not of the offender, of other people. So compliance and non-compliance is really, really easy to talk about when you're looking at cases, when you're talking about legislation, the effectiveness of legislation, the purpose of legislation, the purpose of law reform, everything like that. Compliance and non-compliance is really, really easy to engage with in a meaningful way as well. It's not like you're just throwing it in. It's actually very, very fitting to almost every single crime essay I can possibly imagine. Then we move on to the extent to which the law reflects moral and ethical standards. I know that moral and ethical almost sound synonymous to a lot of people, and it's not super important that you make the differentiation for this legal essay. In fact, you could really talk about the two at the same time if you like. The morals and ethics of society are to be reflected in our criminal justice system. That is the reason why we have law reform after all. And this is integral to law reform in that our morals and ethical values need to be reflected in the criminal justice system, or else how would society have respect for a system that doesn't reflect our own morals? It just doesn't make sense. It's really important that there is some kind of reciprocal nature between morals and ethics and the way the criminal justice system is executed. Obviously, moral and ethical standards change over time. So capital punishment is one really, really simple example, and that we did have capital punishment in Australia. And when we look at it now, we can see that that's not the way that we want to approach things at the moment. It's a lot of the condemnation that different nations who use capital punishment receive. So over time, we've changed this, and now capital punishment has been abolished in Australia. And that's showing that our moral and ethical standards have changed over times. So you can incorporate moral and ethical standards into a lot of legal studies, crime essays particularly as well. But I know this is one of the themes and challenges for the options as well. So do consider putting moral and ethical standards at the forefront of your mind when you're writing your essays. Then the role of law reform. I also love talking about law reform because I think it is a really, really rich essay topic on its own, but also you can be talking about law reform in so many different essays at the same time. I know some students this year receive law reform as their essay questions, either for half yearlies or trials. So some of the students that are viewing this video right now have a bit of practice with this. Law reform is really, really interesting in that obviously we're looking at the reasons why the law is changing, and has it become more effective when it's changed, or has it created more problems, or even just more controversy. In the preliminary syllabus, we talk about law reform, so back in year 11, and I've put down the 3 causes of triggers of law reform down the bottom there. New concepts of justice, changing social values, and new technology. It's not very often that I reference the preliminary syllabus in a HSC lecture, but in this situation I thought it'd be good to bring it to the forefront of your mind so we can recognise exactly why the law is changing. As we understand new ways of the integrity of evidence, for example, we need to accommodate our laws to the new technology, the changing social values, the changing concepts of justice, all of these things. Classic example again, capital punishment. So we're changing the law. Recently as well, bail reforms, victim impact statement reforms. In the ATAR Notes Legal Studies Notes edition, the print book that you can buy, I've got a whole page summary there that's got really good notes on different law reforms, starting way back from capital punishment, also talking about newer law reforms as well. When it comes to the way the law balances the rights of victims, offenders, and society, I want to talk about tension, and that although maybe in this particular circumstance the victim's rights are protected, potentially the offender's rights are being infringed. This is a really, really awesome way to set up your entire essay. We will be talking about essay planning in another one of these videos, so stay tuned for that one. But this is a great way to be viewing. If a question is asking you how effective is such and such in such and such, you need to be asking effective for who? Effective for the victims, effective for society, effective for the offenders. So we need to be going through that and having a look at each and every one of them. There will be times when nearly every party in the entire thing has had their rights pretty well satisfied. There are times when, in order to protect one, another person's rights are infringed, particularly when we're talking about sexual offenders registration, for example. This is quite controversial, and that a lot of the argument is if these people have committed the crime and then they've done the time, why are we still retaining information on them in a way that means it's difficult for them to move on with their lives after they've done their time. So this, for example, you would say to some extent this could be supporting the right of the victim and society to remain safe, but at the same time this is inflicting on the right of the offender to liberty and to privacy, for example. So this is the kind of dichotomous way that we would look into this. The effectiveness of legal and non-legal measures is the last theme and challenge for the crime syllabus. I know it gets confusing sometimes when you have a legal measure that is supported by a non-legal measure or back and forth, and it becomes difficult to separate the two and work out which is which. Most importantly, you can just look at a legal measure is there legislation for it? If it is mandated in legislation, it is a legal measure, and then a non-legal measure is non-legislated. That's not to say that the two of them won't work together. For example, a non-legal measure, as I've got in the example here, a non-government organisation is lobbying for law reform. So this is a non-legal measure which then prompted a legal measure of changing legislation. So the two of them can work together. When you're writing your essays, I think a lot of the time we stress, or at least I certainly did, on trying to separate the two so that I could prove I know the difference. This doesn't have to be this way. In fact, you can talk about the two of them almost symbiotically, and the way that one leads to another, how one makes the other more effective, and so forth. Alright, thank you for watching. I hope you got something out of this video. I know it is a little more unusual because we're focusing on this weird combination of skills and content in this video and looking at the themes and challenges, but it is super important because students aren't looking at it enough. It's a really easy thing to embed into your essay, and like I know because I'm marking essays on atarnotes.com and I see that not everyone is using them, and it's a really easy thing you can do to increase the sophistication of the way that you deal with legal terminology. But also the fact that the entire essay question really could come from the themes and challenges. So you'd be selling yourself short if you're not looking into them and considering them and tagging them with little pieces of the syllabus and working out exactly where they might be quizzed. So I hope you enjoy this video. I hope that you got something out of it. I hope that when you look at the other videos, you do as well. I'll see you in the studies of religion videos if you're doing that. Otherwise, please check out the other legal videos on essays, and that's another skill-based one, but also I've gone through and done content-based one for sentencing and punishment procedures. So check that one out. As always, head to atarnotes.com if you have any questions, you want to ask anything. You can download a whole bunch of other students' essays and notes from previous years, and don't forget you can get these notes as well. I'm super proud of this publication, HSC Legal Studies ATAR Notes book here. It's got everything you need for crime and human rights. It's got revision questions, it's got little study sheets in there, everything you need. This is a combination of my notes that I use in my HSC to get a band 6, but then I updated them. They're not just for me anymore, they're made especially with you guys in mind. They've updated even further than my own HSC, which is in 2015. So this is a excellent thing to add to your edition just in time for HSC as well. I really recommend you check it out. As always, thanks for watching.